Well, we're approaching the end of March, and all the major EV charging players have published their 2024 year-end results. So let's go ahead and get into a current state of the industry and what's ahead in 2025. Subsequent to the presidential election in the United States, there's been a narrative developing that the federal government has ended EV charging progress by introducing purposeful blockers to existing in-flight federal programs. Now, I personally know that that hyperbole is not based in fact and an inflated view on the importance of the federal government's programming in this area. Specifically, prior to the election, with the NEVI program existing and getting spun up and actually seeing some inertia, what I was finding in the tracking of DC fast charger implementation throughout the United States and Canada, that only a very small portion of it was funded by federal sources. Most of it was private enterprise looking at a business opportunity and spending private money in order to put in DC fast chargers. So, although the NEVI program has hundreds of stations in their build list, and that has been severely kneecapped, curtailed, or whatever other adjective you wish to throw at it, in the big picture, it really is not that big of a deal as far as forward progress with electric vehicle charging in the United States and Canada. At least that's my perspective, and I believe that's a fact-based opinion looking at data, the actual raw numbers of stations getting installed and who's paying for those stations, what the reasoning can be understood for those stations getting put into the ground is, and things like that. So it's not a litigated process, and it's not something that a good steward government is trying to encourage, something like that. It's American capitalism at work, putting in what is seen to be a service for a burgeoning market, is in my opinion. So let's quickly go over some of the 2024 year-end results that have been recently published, starting with Electrify America. They have stated that in 2025, they're expecting 30% growth. Now, that number could be interpreted a couple of different ways. It could be interpreted 30% more Electrify America stations. It could be interpreted 30% more Electrify America stalls. So the number of stalls and the number of stations is not the same thing. Or it could be 30% more energy delivered through 2025. And they weren't overly clear on that number. It was just kind of a number thrown out there. We're going to grow 30% in 2025. Still, that's a very large number considering everyone else is growing as well. And I suspect, if I had to guess, it's the amount of energy that is going to be delivered in 2025. They're expecting to be 30% more than in 2024, because if you look at how much energy they delivered in 2024, that was also a stair step up from 2023. So if you just draw a graph, you could plot it out and say, well, we're going to be at 30% more. I think that's where they drew that number from. Also, there's continued talk about Electrify America flagship stations, and we're starting to see what those look like. There are two actually in operation in 2024, and it looks like in 2025, a new one in Santa Barbara, California, with canopies and battery storage is going to be getting its build started and perhaps completed. I'm not 100% sure about that. There is a new listing on PlugShare, and so I believe the construction is either soon to start, cited from a permit being found or something. But someone recently put in a PlugShare listing for Electrify America in Santa Barbara at the flagship location. And also, considering Electrify America's growth, there's a very high number of stations in the state of California that have been awarded NEVI funding. Now, we know that the NEVI program has been curtailed, but in the state of California, I believe their plans are to proceed with the locations that have been previously awarded during the previous administration. And in that grouping is a very large number of Electrify America stations. So if nothing else, even if they didn't build any more stations, there's dozens of stations in the state of California with Electrify America name on it in order to receive NEVI funds for build. Next, Mercedes-Benz, the car maker, has decided to start a business unit that existed in Europe, but now is present in the United States, branded Mercedes-Benz High-Powered Charging. They've been putting in stations throughout 2024. They actually opened their first one at their North American headquarters in 2023, Sandy Springs, Georgia, north of Atlanta. But in 2024, we started to see a bit of an uptick with the very large convenience store brand Buc-ee's. Now, Buc-ee's, when I say very large, it's not large in the number of locations, but it's very large in the number of the square footage of the darn things. That's a Texas-sourced company, and so they Texas-size their convenience stores, and they are actually the largest convenience stores in the world. Every time they open a new Buc-ee's, they make it a little bit bigger, so the new Buc-ee's is now the new largest convenience store in the world. And they're very great facilities. Tesla has been partnering with them for a while. Electrify America has for a while as well. And I believe the intention with Mercedes-Benz is to build into every single Buc-ee's. More than half are in the state of Texas. So there's been a very heavy presence in the state of Texas of Mercedes-Benz charging station builds. But some of them are in other states as well, mostly in the Southeast. And so that was occurring through 2024. And just this past week, we saw the first station at a Simon Mall. The reason that's significant is there was a press release in 2024 talking about a partnership with Simon Mall Properties with Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging. We hadn't seen anything progressing, but just this past week, we now have our first station that is open in the ChargePoint app, but I actually was looped in from someone at the Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging organization saying it's not actually commissioned yet, but it is, the back-end processing was established, and that's where it lit up in the ChargePoint app. But anyway, soon to be opened a Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging stations at a Simon Mall. Next is EVgo, which had a terrific year in 2024. And you'll notice a theme here is that every single one of these EV charging networks is expanding significantly. And that's a result of what we're looking at is the adoption curve of electric vehicles is continuing right on script. And so that means the demand for electric vehicle chargers is continuing to increase as well. EVgo actually said in their slide deck to investors for the year-end 2024 that they expect, even if no electric vehicles were sold through all of 2025, there would still be a gap in the number of current electric vehicles on the road and the number of chargers that are available. So they still see it as a growth market, even if no more cars were sold, but that's not going to happen. We're going to continue to increase. So they're working behind the curve. And one of the things they've accomplished in order to help give themselves a booster shot is a Department of Energy loan to the tune of $1.25 billion. Now, the loan is not actually a loan from the Department of Energy. And actually what it is it's just a loan guarantee. So it's kind of like when a teenager goes to buy a car, their parent co-signs for them in order to purchase their car, saying that if the child doesn't pay their bills, I'll pay it for them. That's basically what the loan guarantee with the Department of Energy. So it's no money out of the coffers of the United States government or the Treasury. It's just a guarantee on a loan. So should EVgo default on the loan, the Department of Energy has agreed. So what that does is it lowers the interest rate that they can receive for that loan below prime. So very advantageous for them. They also had an investor call where it was asked if that Department of Energy loan was clawed back, what their intentions were. And they said, well, really, we're in a growth market. So should the United States government not wish to invest in us, we've already solicited other sources of funding. So someone else will stand in and provide the funds necessary should this DOE loan be somehow clawed back. But it's already been dispersed in the month of January. And I understand $75 million is going to be dispersed every quarter between now and 2030. So the money's being dispersed and that loan vehicle is in place, and EVgo is expecting to have a very rapid expansion to the tune of basically 300% growth between now and 2030. They're going to triple the size of their network. So there's a lot of people who are saying EVgo is not a reliable network, and there was a Consumers Report article recently concerning the reliability of EVgo and the success of a person showing up to an EVgo station and being able to get a charge. And it was something very low, something like 43% of the time. I think I'll have to look up the exact article. Someone was not able to. And what unfortunately is happening there is, in the past, EVgo partnered with Nissan for the Leaf when it was in its very early days. And so there's a lot of stations out there that are these 50 kilowatt city chargers that were made for a bygone era that are still in service and basically aged out of service life. And so although that's true, I'm not going to argue the Consumer Reports number, and I don't know where they got their study from. These new stations are not like that. These are a new breed of stations, specifically with Pilot Flying J. They typically have canopies. There's also talk about partnering with General Motors this year in order to put in what are known as flagship stations, which also have canopies, brand new chargers, very well very specific to site design at locations that have amenities. So these are signature locations that are all coming online, and my wife and I recently took a trip to the Grand Canyon National Park from North Carolina using mostly Pilot Flying J stations, and I can't tell you how nice it is. Right off the interstate, pull into a truck stop with a canopy over the chargers, use the windshield, squeegees, garbage cans. The facilities are always open 24/7, 365. It's perfect. I mean, you can't put together a better combination of locations to put in electric vehicle chargers than Pilot Flying J, in my personal opinion. They're really nice stations. And so although EVgo has gotten that flack from the Consumer Report article, I think it's a result primarily of the aging hardware from the Nissan Leaf days. The new chargers, I don't think, have that same, or can have that same criticism leveled on them. I haven't. I just plug in, I have Auto Charge Plus, authenticate my session, and it starts right away, and it's very reliable. Haven't had a problem. The next one is a new entry into the electric vehicle charging space. The name of the company is IONNA, and I'm assuming because people are watching the Out of Spec channel, they're familiar with the concept of who IONNA is. But just in case, let me see if I could quickly name who the founding members of IONNA are. It is, let's see, Toyota, Honda, Kia, Hyundai, BMW, Mercedes, GM, and Stellantis. I think that's all 8 of them got together, and each one of those OEM manufacturers has a board member overseeing the IONNA organization. So the CEO, Seth Cutler, reports to the board, and that's also where they receive their funding from. Because of that, the deep pockets of those 8 automakers is able to fund a premium experience. And what we're seeing is basically a focus group. What would you want to see in an EV charging station result? And they're beautiful stations. My goodness, they got canopies, they got the fastest chargers, they got the Alpitronic HYC 400s with the 5-meter long matriculating cables and silicon carbide rectifiers and attached facilities typically, or they put it on the property of a partner that has attached facilities. Seems to be reasonably priced, and just a really good vibe for a new entry into the electric vehicle charging space. Some specific things we know about IONNA as a result of their ribbon cutting last month, is that they intend to put 1,000 stalls in operation by the end of the year, 30,000 stalls by the end of 2030, each of them having basic amenities. So unlike other people like Electrify America, who relies on other people to provide the amenities, and EVgo and Tesla Supercharger, IONNA provides their own amenities. So when you pull into IONNA station, there's a garbage can, there's a window squeegee. They make sure that there's restrooms available. Pet amenities are a focus of theirs because when people are traveling with pets, they need a place for the pet to be taken care of. And so they focus on very basic amenities being present at each one of their stations, which I really appreciate. They're not just putting chargers as an approach to surviving an electric vehicle road trip with bare necessity electricity. They're doing the other things, canopy to keep the rain off, and garbage cans so you can empty the car and not leave trash lying around, and a restroom so you can use the facilities. Vending machines or restaurants or all kinds of things that are available at IONNA stations. So it definitely is a very optimistic path ahead for IONNA, and they're executing. There is no question that this is vaporware or greenwashing. This is not greenwashing or vaporware. They are building stations. They just recently, I found 2 additional stations, and this is, I had just looked about a week ago, and then yesterday I looked again, and there's 2 more stations, one in Daytona Beach, Florida that has been spotted, and one north of Minneapolis, St. Paul has now been spotted as well. So their intentions to install 1,000 stalls by the end of this year, 2025, seems legitimate by all accounts. And again, this is based on data. Another one, Tesla Supercharger. Looks like 2025 will be a banner year for them. They recently replaced version 2 and version 3 stalls in Germany with version 4. And there's speculation a similar type of effort will occur in North America. I forgot the exact number of stalls that were replaced, but it was very large. I think it was 3,000 stalls were replaced or something like that with version 4 dispensers that provides the longer cable for non-Tesla vehicles in order to be able to charge easier. I drive a Chevrolet Equinox EV, and the charge port is in the back of the driver's side quarter panel, making a version 3 or version 3 dispenser near impossible. I got to nose really freaking close in order to get the cable to reach. So those version 4 dispensers will definitely be helpful, and also the version 4 chargers coming online at some time in 2025. However, they are similarly working on these big flagship stations. They don't call them flagships, but EA has their flagships. EVgo has the General Motors flagships that they're working on. So each one is trying to outdo the other one with some kind of crowd-pleasing, huge station that has some kind of Instagrammable effect to it. IONNA has something called beacon rechargeries, which is in that same class of very large, many stalls, probably a couple of dozen stalls, large canopies, things like that. And then Tesla says, well, screw you all. We're going to just up the ante once again. So they have 2 big new stations coming on Interstate 5 in California. One is 168 stalls at a place they're calling the Oasis, which is in the town of Lost Hills. And construction has already begun on this. You see there are solar canopies in the rendering, as well as pull-through stalls for what look to be Cybertrucks pulling some kind of trailer, but I actually think those are going to be perhaps semi-stalls, because there's a growing narrative out of Tesla with supercharger stations that are providing megawatt charging to Tesla semis, specifically in the town of Bakersfield, California. It's close to I-5. There's a station going in that specifically is calling out Tesla's semi stalls going in. So in the rendering, you could actually see Tesla semis charging at this station. And we know that the Nevada factory is soon to start scaled production or volume production of the Tesla Semi. And so all these trucks are going to need places to charge. And it looks like they're gearing up their supercharger team in order to start including those into the design builds of future stations. There's also what will be, should it occur, the largest Tesla supercharger station in the world going into a place called Yeehaw Junction, which is a very desolate part of the United States. I watched someone named Mileage Mike on YouTube who traverses interstates and talks about the transportation industry in the United States from an insider's perspective. And it's one of the longest stretches where you don't have an exit in the entire interstate system coming up to the EVgo junction. So it makes sense to put a large station there, but this one is going to be the largest should they go through. And the land has been spotted, and I think there's actually construction equipment on the property now. So 200 stalls going into Yeehaw Junction in the middle of Florida. It's south of Orlando and north of West Palm Beach on the Sunshine State Parkway. So we have that to look forward to as well. So as I said, each one of these titans is going through the process of trying to duke it out with the other person and come up with something that is doing a one-upmanship. So obviously the narrative that we're slowing down EV charging is just not based in fact. Flow is a company who is based in Canada, and normally when their chargers go in, they're in Canada as well. I'm not quite sure why the affinity of that has occurred and they haven't gotten into the United States. Normally when you see a Flow station go into the United States, it's in the Northeast or close to the Canadian border, and I think there might be some operational reason why they stay close to home. But regardless, there's something new called a Flow Ultra, which is a bigger charging stall unit that has really nice distinctive lighting, cable management, and higher throughput. They also do operations for their chargers. So it's kind of like ChargePoint, where they make hardware and sell it to other people, but they also run it themselves. Rivian has been doing a pretty large spin-up. They've been very methodical with the Rivian Adventure Network builds. And there was an announcement that they were going to open up their Adventure Network to non-Rivians in 2024. And they did what they did is they said, okay, we're going to open it up for every net new station. For all the existing ones, no, we're not going to open those up. However, we just saw this past week several stations that were existing get converted over to being available for non-Rivians. One of them is close to my house. I'm going to go over and take a look at it in the coming days, perhaps this weekend, to see exactly if they've changed out the hardware or if they've just done some kind of billing change. The last one of the major players that I want to touch on is NEVI. And although NEVI is not a charging provider, if you group all these stations that were the NEVI program into one grouping, it would be a very large electric vehicle charging operator. Now, that's not really the case, but there is some characteristics that make NEVI stations similar. So I guess you could draw a line to that extent. However, the change in administrations has made the NEVI program much different than what it was just a few months ago. And now we're seeing a significant amount of fracturing of participation in the NEVI program. And so we're not quite sure what's going to happen, but what we are sure of is that there are NEVI stations opening. The state of Pennsylvania has opened maybe half a dozen since the change in administrations. Some states have not, have basically ended their NEVI participation altogether. But the NEVI program will be turning stations on through 2025 to an increasing degree. And it's questionable exactly how that's going to play out. So definitely something to keep our eyes on. But I don't think we can count them out as a very large player in the electric vehicle charging space. Now I want to also talk about some secondary players that have a significant effect and will be rising stars throughout 2025. The first of which is BP Pulse. And just today, as I very commonly do, I start my day by just doing a quick assessment of if there's anything new. And BP Pulse opened a brand new 12-stall Alpitronic HYC 400 station at a Travel Centers of America in London, Ohio, just yesterday on Interstate. So this is happening. Big money is showing up and putting in very large stations along interstate corridors and other places. And although BP Pulse I'm categorizing as a secondary player, they're one of the large, British Petroleum particularly is one of the largest companies on the planet. They have an amazing amount of cash flow at their disposal, and they've recently had a announcement that they're going to be dialing back the amount of budget for electric vehicle chargers and other renewable initiatives. However, there's still billions of dollars going towards these builds. So we're seeing very large charging stations going into travel centers of America. We're seeing very large charging stations going into their gigahubs, is what they're calling their flagship locations. There was one recently spotted outside of LAX that was a bit evasive for us to actually locate, but it was finally identified, and it has a canopy designed for rideshare people right next to a rental agency. They partnered with Hertz, so they're kind of staying close quarters with Hertz through these airport builds. And they're also building along travel corridors because they actually own outright Travel Centers of America, which is a very large amount of properties. I think there's 300 of them in the United States currently. And so they're building into those as well. And they also have British Petroleum gas stations like Thornton's, and AMPM, I think, is another one of their brands in California. And so they're building into gas stations as well. So BP Pulse for sure. Secondly, Walmart Corp has thrown their hat in the ring for building electric vehicle charging in retail property, which they own. Obviously, they're competing with Amazon, looking for a path to relevancy. And one of the ways they can encourage people to come to their stores is to provide electric vehicle charging. And so it's an avalanche of chargers that are going in very quickly in Texas, specifically the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We heard about this last year, but this year is actually happening. And just last week, they opened their first station. These are Alpitronic Hyperchargers, HYC 400s as well, going into Walmart properties. And we understand that the next market that they're going to be looking at is the Phoenix area, with who knows what after that, but they are talking about thousands of locations getting these chargers. Through 2025, we could probably expect, if I had to guess, maybe 100, maybe 200, depending on how fast they start spinning up. So definitely another one to keep an eye on. Quick Trip in the Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa area was the recipient of many NEVI awards. However, they're also building into locations that are that they own that have not received NEVI awards. So another player to watch. Additionally, Circle K, which is the largest convenience store operator in the world, as I understand it, they have presence in Europe. They have a significant amount of presence in the United States and Canada. Has been doing electric vehicle charging. There's been a bit of a pause out of Circle K recently, at least with their North American builds. Their European builds are still going on, but North America seems to be paused right now for some reason, and I think they're doing a pause and assess portion of the project, but we'll have to see what comes from them. Another up-and-coming player is Electric Era, who has figured out how to install electric vehicle charging stations quickly in the state of California and elsewhere, and they've had tremendous success. They've also formed many partnerships and are now expanding nationwide. So the team at Electric Era is definitely something to keep an eye on through 2025. Ford, who is not a member of IONNA, has a network called Ford Charge, which principally exists on Ford dealership properties. Now, I'm not sure the specific arrangements that Ford has with their dealer network concerning putting electric vehicle charging on their property, but it has emerged as very quietly amassing a large number of stations, and there doesn't appear to be any end in sight to the accumulation of additional stations at Ford dealerships throughout the United States and Canada. Another two that I want to put together, Red E out of Michigan and Francis, which I believe is based in Oklahoma. Both were very heavily dependent on NEVI awards funding new station builds. However, both of those seem to be grinding to a halt as a result of the NEVI program being crippled. So I haven't seen much out of either one of those two, except for Francis has had a couple in the state of Pennsylvania, which I mentioned is going forward with their NEVI builds and disbursements of funds. But Ready, I have not seen anything out of in several months. Another secondary player in Canada, a company called BC Hydro, which is the electrical company in the western portion of the country. A lot of the energy in the western portion of Canada is produced from hydroelectric, and that's where the name comes from. But they also install electric vehicle charging stations, and they've been doing so with a increasing amount of activity recently. So there's a brief overview of where the industry currently rests as we come out of 2024 with the assessments from each one of the major players, and also the change in administration and what to expect to keep an eye on for 2025. And we'll be here keeping an eye on them for you. Thanks for watching.